So the Act Man is a guy who does long-form game reviews and analysis, and for the most part his content is alright. On a YouTuber tier list I'd put him at like a D. He's not really my cup of tea, but I can recognize that he brings some value to people, and I can see why he's popular. Now, one video that did really interest me was about the politicization of video games.
Yes, politicization.
And his take was utterly incoherent, and I'm surprised he didn't catch more shit for it. He had some really cringy opinions on the gaming community, how politics mixes with gaming, and what it means to be political. Not to mention the actual core message of his video, which is that games should not be politicized, he actually goes on to contradict. I'll get to that towards the end because it's a bit more complicated. But first...
Because I don't like talking about politics or anything to do with politics. Politics are fucking lame. Yes, they're essential for the function of society, but they're fucking lame to talk about. I hate talking about politics. Ah!
Ladies and gentlemen, we got him.
Now, all jokes aside, the Act Man in this very video actually takes some pretty strong political stances that he probably doesn't see as political stances.
I don't go to NFL games to be protested at.
No.
I don't play video games to have an agenda forced on me.
I really wish that we could separate sports and politics, or pretty much everything in politics.
And it's the right too. It's the right and the left, but I see more of the left bullshit than the right bullshit.
Now, I'm not going to attack his opinions on protest, but being an anti-kneeler or not wanting to hear other people's protests is a pretty hardline political position in and of itself. Advocating for the status quo is still a political position, which is fine. That's an outlook you can defend, but you at least have to acknowledge that it is what it is. But you can't say you hate talking about politics and then come out of left field, or I guess in this case right field, and say that you don't want to see a person protest at your hand egg game.
2 years ago, I made some controversial tweets about transgender people. Because I don't like talking about politics or anything to do with politics.
Okay, let's move on.
You know, for a long time, video games were just a haven for people, you know? It's a community that's been bullied and beaten back and targeted and harassed and attacked by all sorts of people, by religious folk, by mainstream news. It's been attacked by people's parents. It's been attacked by the government, Hillary Clinton.
This is unironically the most gamers rise up kind of shit I've ever heard. I can't believe that gamers have been literally crucified. For generations, epic gamers like myself had to keep their identity a secret or face the repercussions. I mean, sure, some shitty narratives were started by some dumb pundits and religious folk who claimed that games caused violence or whatever, but come on, the treatment video games got was really not any worse than rap music or rock music or violent movies and TV shows.
But in these last few years, the glory days of simpler times are starting to slip away. And what we're starting to see is the politicization of video games. Meaning that when a new game comes out, there's people who will write articles or complain and say this game needs to make a point about racial issues in the world today. And then there's people that just want to enjoy this product for what it is.
You can still very easily enjoy games for what they are, dude. It's not that hard to do. This is not some new concept that started emerging in the last few years. Games have been politicized forever. Look at this clip from Yahtzee of The Escapist in a review of COD 4 from 2008.
What I like about Call of Duty 4 is that there's less of the smarmy black and white my country 'tis of thee jingoism that turns me off most war games, while the US Marines act with short-sighted self-righteousness, convinced that they're the heroes in their own personal war movie, you know, just like in real life.
Or in his Uncharted review.
Never been any decent games for white supremacists. That is until Uncharted, Drake's Fortune, a rip-snorting adventure in which a waspish manly man runs around slaughtering everyone who had the poor judgment to not be born white. Every single minority on Earth is represented in the ranks of Uncharted's bad guys, but like George W. Bush, let's forget about the well-being of non-Caucasians and put on our reviewing pants.
Is that social and political commentary in a video game review? The thing is, games have always been politicized, and they've always had political implications. It's just that there are more people today analyzing video games, and through the advent of social media, you're more likely to see these kinds of articles. Are some of these articles really dumb? Yeah, of course. But that's not inherently to do with the politicization of video games. That's because there's a ton of content being produced all the time. Some of that is going to be dumb. Just don't engage with it.
Because I don't think it has a place in video games. I think the only thing it really does is sow discourse amongst the greater gaming community. It tears people apart. It tries to separate us into groups. It's just like, me as a gamer, at a certain point, I just want this shit to disappear. I don't want these stories to clog up my Twitter feed. I don't want this shit to be so widely discussed about when we're all here to have fun. The game industry, and a lot of people who work in it, and a lot of journalists, a lot of people who write about it, is being hijacked. The game industry is being hijacked by people who want to make the world a better place.
Now, I think it's a bit dramatic to suggest that it's being hijacked. I mean, when I hear the word hijacked, I think of 9/11, not some random tweets from some relative no-name that gets barely any likes. So it's not really being hijacked. What's happened is, people now have the ability to spread and consume a greater diversity of opinions, and gaming is now starting to be treated seriously as a proper art form, just as music and movies have been for years. Which also means looking at or critiquing political aspects and implications of games. This was an inevitable result of the growth of the industry. These are good things. You may not agree with some of these opinions, but then make a video complaining specifically about those opinions, not about the general politicization of gaming. Because hey, newsflash buddy, games are political. They're born out of a political context and they're consumed in a political context. And some people like to or think it's important to discuss this aspect of games.
You know, video games for a long time have been a sort of haven for all sorts of people. Social outcasts, people with disabilities, those who don't have many friends. Video games are a way for people of all walks of life to just come together and enjoy something and be able to play it and discuss it and just have fun and enjoy life.
Games still are a great form of escapism. You can still enjoy games for what it is or what they are without taking part in these political discussions. They are easily ignored. Okay, so far all I've really said is that he's probably more political than he says he is, and he has some weird, cringy gamers rise up kind of beliefs. But let's tackle the actual meat and core message of his video. He states that developers forcing their politics into games and journalists forcing political discussions surrounding games is dumb and is ruining gaming.
There's people who will write articles or complain and say this game needs to make a point about racial issues in the world today. The way it seems like certain companies and individuals are starting to see video games as a tool for pushing an agenda, to get what they want, to advance themselves. They see their games as a way to make a statement instead of a quality product. You know, it's shit like that, where game developers are on such a big fucking high horse. And this self-righteous bullshit is what's really bugging the crap out of me. Because I don't think it has a place in video games. Basically what I'm saying is I don't want video games to be about politics.
However, in the same video, he later backtracks and he says that it's fine for journalists to talk about politics related to a game and to have political messages in games.
And you know, I'm not saying that people shouldn't write their reviews a certain way or their articles a certain way, that we shouldn't talk about politics at all when it comes to video games. I'm not saying that. You know, there's a difference between a game that has politics in it and bringing politics into a game where it just doesn't belong. And you know, it's alright if a game developer wants to tackle those issues and wants to do it in a game of their choosing. It's okay if a company as a whole wants to do that.
I'm not sure how you reconcile these two positions. They are completely incompatible. A perfect example of his nonsensical contradictory stance is, he said that people who complained about there being a black dude on the cover of Battlefield 1 were stupid? Something along the lines of, you know, why would you care that much? But then went on to complain about the woman in Battlefield 5.
Then there's the Battlefield 5 controversy, where they wanted to put women and all sorts of weird shit into their World War II video game. We're here doing the right thing. My child needs to be able to play as a female in World War II because I don't have the balls to explain to her that women didn't often fight in World War II.
Oh yeah, I forgot Battlefield 5 is basically like a history textbook that for some reason has to completely 100% adhere to real history so they can teach our next generation about World War II, I guess? So all of this basically boils down to him saying, wah, me no likey politics in some instances. If you want to disagree with the specific political messages that some articles or games push, then do that, that's fine. But don't try and mask your disdain for very particular political stances by trying to claim that you're against the wholesale idea of games being politicized, and with that boundary being arbitrarily defined by you. Because you can't remain consistent under that framework.
I don't bring politics into the discussion unless it's already there. It's like, why can't you talk about the politics within Witcher 3? Why can't you talk about the politics within Witcher 3 and not about your own politics, beliefs, and agendas and pushing that onto Witcher 3? Do you guys get what I'm saying?
No, I don't get it, because it makes no fucking sense. The only charitable interpretation I can have from his statement is that we should only be discussing topics if the developer of a game intentionally and explicitly incorporates it into their story or world. And that's really fucking stupid, because games can have political implications that the developers don't intend or they aren't cognizant of. Like, I'm pretty sure the people who made this cartoon didn't want to spark a whole discussion about race. And this sort of thing wasn't seen as completely abnormal at the time. And you can bet that when people pointed at that and brought it up as a potential talking point or issue, that there would have been people like the Act Man who would have said shit like, can we just enjoy the cartoon for what it is and not make it about real issues? You're so dumb, bro. And in the example of The Witcher 3 he brings up,
Witcher 3, a game based on Polish mythology and folklore, was shit on by some douchebag Tariq Musa because it didn't have black people in it.
I personally agree that there shouldn't be this pressure for every single game to feel like they have to include minorities. But that doesn't mean that this discussion around how minorities are portrayed in video games is not worth having, just because it relates to real life issues. I get why you'd feel that this sort of discussion is kind of cringy, because it probably shouldn't matter, and you sometimes feel like people should be focusing more on quote-unquote real issues. But unfortunately in real life and how people's perceptions of others works, these sorts of things have real demonstrable effects. My problem with what the Act Man has said is that he never makes a clear or valid argument for when talking about politics related to a game belongs or it doesn't belong. Whether or not he likes it, virtually every game ever has always been politicized to some extent. Developers will almost always have some sort of moral messaging or some sort of political message to their games. None of us live in a vacuum where our brain and our biases are free of political influence. Real life politics bleeds through when developers make a game. It's inevitable. And to deny that or discussion surrounding that is to be really naive. It feels like to me that he wanted to say something complex or nuanced about politics in games, because I think on some level he recognizes that politics will exist in gaming, because a lot of the games he likes has political elements. And I think this is why he sort of backtracks and he says that having politics in games is okay, but it basically completely contradicted what he said previously. So in the end, that nuanced position he thinks he has just kind of came off as incoherent gibberish. So he spent like 16 minutes talking a whole lot without really saying anything, except he goes on a weird tangent at the end about how we all have freedom, I guess.
I'm not saying that people shouldn't write their reviews a certain way or their articles a certain way, that we shouldn't talk about politics at all when it comes to video games. I'm not saying that. We all have freedom, we all have the right to discuss what we want to. It's alright if a game developer wants to tackle those issues and wants to do it in a game of their choosing. It's okay if a company as a whole wants to do that. And it's also okay for us to not want to buy it, to not be subjected to that stuff, to not pay for that shit.
Like, okay, cool. Like, I guess we have the freedom to buy what we want, but I think most of us already knew that. But what does that have to do with your position that you don't want games to be politicized?
I want game developers to just make video games.
To me, it feels pretty obvious that he just opposes some very specific political stances. Like, if you just want to shit on cringy SJW some more, then do that, but just own that, you know? Don't come out with this wishy-washy blanket, stop politicizing my video games, I'm an oppressed gamer bullshit. This is something that actually really frustrates me, that people find it really hard to critically think through their beliefs, and to even be honest with themselves, which makes it impossible to be honest to others. And that makes it really hard to pin down what people actually think, and who's a bad faith actor and who's not. But I don't know, maybe I'm getting too political.